Welcome to Sector Report. I'm David Beatson. On this edition, New Zealand's $5 billion horticulture industry is battling biosecurity threats at home and trade barriers abroad. How's it shaping up? Can the growing demand for cider pull Kiwi apple growers out of the doldrums? And one drought-stricken farmer reveals how Lucerne Pasture has changed his farm and his life.
The agent just said, "Look, Doug, you're just sitting at home crying into your pillow about things. Get out of it for a day." And it was the best thing I've ever done in my life.
Our increasingly erratic weather is a challenging problem for grassland farmers. It's driving a huge surge of interest from drought-stricken farmers in the range of new grass varieties that's coming onto the market. Plant breeders are turning out new varieties of cocksfoot, meadow fescue, red clover and lucerne, all designed to withstand grazing pressures in dry conditions. And in Marlborough, Drew Chappell found one farmer who says those breeds saved his farm and changed his life.
It may only be whispered in some circles, but spring is nearly here. For dry stock farmers, that usually means two things: lambing and plenty of feed.
By the third week of August, I'd expect it to be, probably up about this high, and you won't see the gaps here anymore. It'll just be a swath.
For Doug Avery, farming more than 13,000 stock units in Marlborough, one of the driest parts of the country, springtime used to be the stuff of nightmares. Things got so bad that in 1998 he was considering chucking in the towel.
We had 8 years of continuous drought, and included in that were 4 years which were described as 1 in 100 year droughts. And that took me and pretty much everyone else in this area beyond a place that we'd ever been before. Still a bit fresh. And, I think I'd always wanted to be a good farmer, but I suddenly looked around and realised that I was degrading my land and my bank account was getting bloody short of money as well.
Frustrated by poor pastures, animal performance and farm gate returns, Doug was at a farming dead end.
We suddenly realised that if we didn't change, we were in trouble. The fourth 1 in 100 year drought, I suddenly realised that it's not going to be 400 years before we get another one. And that's the stage when people first started talking about climate change and things like that. So we became aware that we needed to change, but we didn't know what to change to.
Then, almost by accident, Doug met a man who would change his farm and his life by suggesting the wider use of lucerne, traditionally a supplement feed.
One day, just out of really luck, I was asked by a local agent if I'd jump in the car with him and head to North Canterbury to listen to Dr. Derek Moot talking about lucerne, and I'd never heard of Moot, and our family had been growing lucerne since 1919. My grandfather planted it here when we first came. I went down there, sat down, bit reluctant to attend, and the agent just said, "Look, Doug, you're just sitting at home crying into your pillow about things. Get out of it for a day." And it was the best thing I've ever done in my life.
Professor Derek Moot spent time studying lucerne in England and returned to New Zealand enthusiastic about the crop's potential for our farmers on the drought-prone east coast, where white clover often struggles.
This is starting to kick off, and it'll kick off from here, and when the whole paddock is about this high would be the ideal time for Doug and Fraser to be thinking about coming in and grazing it in the first time, getting in here with ewes and lambs and starting their grazing rotation in the spring. Legumes have the distinct advantage over grasses in that they can take nitrogen from the atmosphere and fix it and turn it into protein. And so you've got a high quality feed because it's high in protein, you've got a deep tap root and a very efficient user of water. So because the plant has high nitrogen content in the leaves all the time, it also uses that limited bucket of water that it has really efficiently to grow high quality dry matter.
And although the thinking behind it has still to catch on among most farmers, the economic argument is certainly compelling.
If we get ryegrass and white clover growing well under an irrigated system, they'll produce about 20 kilograms of dry matter per millimetre of water that they've got available to them. The lucerne will do about 30 kilograms of dry matter per millimetre of water that it's got available to it. So there's sometimes a 2.5 to 3-fold advantage in terms of straight dry matter production out of using the lucerne.
After nearly 10 years of experimenting with the crop, Doug Avery is now reaping the benefits and says others can do the same.
We had sale values off the farm at that time of about $320,000, and today we're nudging $2 million. Today we employ 6 people full time. We've got a lot bigger. We lease land. We've got a dynamic source of incomes into this property, and it's all pretty much based off the success of that plant, that wonderful plant. Moot calls it God's plant.
In April last year, the Averys purchased a 419 hectare block up here, overlooking the rest of the property. Doug reckons from the 62 hectares in which he plans to plant lucerne, the returns from that will be enough to service the debt and principal on the rest of the loan. Doug says the extra money is allowing his family to reinvest back into the farm and take the pressure off at times like this.
These days lambing's one of the slackest times. We used to lamb probably 110 to 125%. These days we're in the 140s, 150s, and within a couple of years we'll be higher than that. We've just scanned, our mixed age ewes this year scanned 198%, so it's unbelievably different road.
Both Doug and Derek accept it will be a difficult transition for any farmer to make, and there will be hiccups along the way.
If you are dryland farming and you get a centre pivot irrigator, that's a big conversion and a big change in your system, and you've got to adapt to it. This is the same. It's almost like a dairy conversion, but it's a lucerne conversion. And there are going to be mistakes, there are going to be things that go wrong. But once you get the system operating and it goes, then it's a spiral up instead of what we're into at the moment with a lot of farming is a spiral down.
To do it or not to do it was just not even an option. And I'm staggered at the number of people who have just watched what we've done here and been so reluctant to try it. And in dryland New Zealand, it's just a no-brainer.
While the pair are certainly making as much noise about the benefits of lucerne as possible, they both stress that help is out there if people want to know more.
When I asked for help, we were inundated by help, and it's never stopped. This place has got excitement occurring from one end of it to the other, and everybody that we employ, including myself, we can't wait to get out in the morning and get stuck into it.
Drew Chappell reporting from Marlborough. Next, how's Horticulture New Zealand shaping up for the next round of its battles against biosecurity threats and barriers to trade? Stay with Sector Report. Horticulture is contributing around $5 billion a year to the New Zealand economy, and the industry set itself a tough target, lift that to $10 billion by 2020. Last week, the industry's 22 producer groups met to take stock of their progress at Horticulture New Zealand's annual conference. Biosecurity threats, barriers to their export trade, water rights and the performance of their own industry association were all on the agenda. And to see how Hort New Zealand's shaping up, here's the organisation's Chief Executive, Peter Silcock. Peter, welcome. There was a bit of a state of play, a bit of a toe-to-toe, should I say, at your conference over biosecurity with the Minister, David Beatson.
Yes.
What's the state of play with that now?
Well, I think certainly the Minister's given us a strong message about how he feels about some of the issues we're raising, but we're not taking a step back in terms of Horticulture New Zealand. Our members are very concerned about biosecurity. We'll continue to raise those issues, but it is important that we work constructively with the Minister and the Ministry on that, and we're doing that.
Just on that front, I know that the Kiwi growers were seeking legal advice on whether they should mount an action against the Ministry over its handling of PSA issues. What's the general Horticulture New Zealand view of that step?
Well, my understanding is they're getting a wider legal opinion about the report in total, and I can understand that. Clearly, Horticulture New Zealand feels that the impact of PSA has been such that it deserves that look. Whether that will result in an action, we're yet to see.
Just in terms of the whole management of biosecurity issues, I mean, it's interesting to note that Now you've got beekeepers being concerned about what you're doing chemically to deal with your biosecurity threat, because it's going to have a biosecurity threat for them.
Yes, and I think this is
Gets more
about
complex, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's about communication, and I think this is one of the things that as a growers organisation we understand. These things are two-way. For instance, the biosecurity measures we put on at the border can be put on at other people can put those on when we're exporting product as well. So, we need to understand that we're an export-focused industry. I think with the beekeepers, it's about communication, and we've had some discussions with them. We need to continue to work with them. We need bees in our industry, and therefore we need to figure out how we can look after them while we're doing other management things. So work together, communicate.
It's clear you've got some concerns about the current level of effectiveness of biosecurity, but did you reach any consensus at the conference on the changes that are needed? I know, for instance, you had virtually the chief officials from the whole biosecurity sector were there.
Yeah, we had a very good discussion in one of the breakout sessions at the conference. It was very well attended by our growers. I think the message we got from Horticulture New Zealand's point of view is you're on the right track. You need to continue to raise these concerns, but we need to look at the solutions. And we've got an active dialogue with the ministry on these things. We're talking to them along with other primary industries, for instance, around the government industry agreements. We're certainly not going headlong into those, but we believe it's worth having a look at that to see whether that can improve our biosecurity.
You have got a government industry agreement, haven't you?
Well, Horticulture New Zealand has not signed a government industry agreement, but some of our sector groups, so as I understand it, the kiwi fruit groups, they have signed, kiwi fruit, tomatoes and a few others have signed a memorandum of understanding. So this is different from an agreement to cost share. This is really an agreement to go through a process where we can look at, if we were going to go into an agreement, what would it look like? What would be covered? What would we do? How would we improve the biosecurity system?
You've actually got 22 different producer groups to represent. Tell me, overall, what is the general financial state of the industry at the moment? We know it's bad in some sectors, but generally, how is it?
Yeah, well, generally, I think you're right in saying that it's quite bad. It's been a very tough year. And the key things in that, particularly we're sending a lot of product to Europe, particularly our apples, onions and kiwi fruit. With the euro where it is now and the exchange rates having a very big impact on the returns of growers. And also, of course, the demand. We're trying to sell into premium markets, so we're looking for our consumers to pay a little bit more for our products because of that premium.
One of the other big policy issues on the table, of course, is freshwater resource management. Is the industry developing a general view of its own on how commercial access to water should be managed?
Yes, we are, and there's a lot of debate around that issue now, and of course we're deeply involved in the Land and Water Forum discussions that are going on. We've one of our staff involved in the small group there, and there's active discussion going on. We think we need a strong national framework which has collaborative processes in place, but we need also a catchment level management of resources. So people manage their own resources and they do that collegially together. That's perhaps a pretty big ask, and it's certainly a huge step from the more antagonistic and confrontational system that we have now. But it's too important for us to be just settling a whole lot of things going to the Environment Court or whatever. We need a much better system than what we've got now.
Peter, talking about antagonism, Australia. How is the relationship with Australia, and can you see some progress being made to break down some of the trade barriers that I know that your sector has been particularly affected by?
Yeah, look, it's pretty tough out there, and I think that some of the barriers, of course, things like apples, it's been around a long time, and even now, while we've got access, the question is, have we got meaningful access? And so, if the rules are so tight that the trade does not occur, you have to question that. Australia is still a very important market for us, so we have a little bit of a love-hate relationship, I guess, and that is that we are seeing a lot of product there. We're seeing a lot of kiwi fruit and avocados and tomatoes and capsicums at certain times of the year. So it's a good market, but it's a tough market to get into, though. Yeah,
there's a lot of knots. And
yes, that's right.
Can you see biosecurity harmonisation being taken to the point where there will be genuine free exchange between the two markets?
Yeah, look, I think there are always going to be biosecurity concerns. We're concerned about getting their Queensland fruit fly, of course. They're concerned about getting our psyllid and things. But the potato market access is it's now on the drawing board. It's probably going to be quite a long process from here, but we hope we're going to get to a workable answer. So this is about taking potatoes into Australia for processing. So this is not necessarily ones that are going to go out into a fresh market that someone might be able to plant in the ground and grow on. This is about going in for processing. So we're hopeful that the Australians are going to accept that in the future. We think it makes sense and we can manage the biosecurity risks. But those risks, well, I guess I'd say I hope those biosecurity risks are always going to be there, because if they're not, that means we've got Queensland fruit fly. If we've got Queensland fruit fly, the New Zealand horticulture industry has got a big problem on its hands.
Peter Silcock, it looks like a busy year ahead. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Peter Silcock, Chief Executive of Horticulture New Zealand. And in a moment, a new way to get New Zealand apples into the Australian market. Stay with us. New Zealand apple growers are having a tough time cracking the Australian market. Despite entry rights last year, Kiwi growers can't sell their fruit across the Tasman because the market's glutted with local produce. But there's more than one way to get a slice of the Aussie apple market, and a boutique Kiwi cider maker, Redwood Cellars, is joining forces with DB Breweries to give it a try. Nelson's Redwood Cellars co-founder, Justin Hall, tells us why he's jumping at the chance. Well, welcome, Justin. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, David.
Now tell me, so let's go right back to, is there much of a tradition to cider making in this country?
Relatively short on global scales.
Yeah.
We do have a long history.
Something less than 100 years.
Yes, correct. So dates back to 1937 with Rochdale Cider based in Nelson. And then also ourselves, the origins of Redwood Cider from 1947 onwards.
You mean the pioneers didn't do it?
Not quite, no. It was a relatively recent start.
Well, tell me, what inspired you to, and your partner, Scotty Chapman, to get into cider making at Redwood Cellars?
It was really a case of having a look at our product portfolio and assessing where we could take the business.
Oh, that sounds very business-like.
Well, we came into it with that approach. We both came out of larger companies and we knew we were coming into a small business, but we had aspirations to make a bigger business. Had a look at the portfolio and said, hey, we're not selling a lot of cider at the moment, but we make very good ciders. We'd won awards. In fact, we're probably Australasia's most awarded cidery. And we decided that there was an opportunity there that we hadn't really grabbed.
How many did you get in 1 month last year?
Oh, the figures escape me, but we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, doing pretty well. I think it was about 11 on 1 month.
Yeah, we're
on
doing
one occasion. Well. Okay, I mean, you obviously had sussed the market before you got into it to see whether there was growth prospect, presumably. Did you actually suss out whether you could continue to make great cider?
Well, interestingly enough, we came into the business on a completely different tack. It made cider and a range of other products, and it was one of the other product categories that we thought was going to be our growth to stardom over the next 10 years.
Which was?
It was actually vinegars.
Vinegars.
And we were looking to export vinegar into Asia. We happened to come in at the tail end of that wave, and it was when we sat back and said, right, where to from here? We looked at our ciders, said, hey, great ciders. We're just not selling enough of them. Magners had just made a huge push in the UK in 2006, and we said, hey, there's an opportunity here. We'd always come into it with a plan of good governance, good management, and it all blossomed from there. We put our passion and enthusiasm into cider.
Okay, cider, who likes them, and what do they like?
Remarkably broad spectrum, so across age groups, male and female. It's been surprising just how wide the uptake of cider is. They enjoy them just because it's a great occasional drink you can enjoy with friends. It's one of those things that it's a great summer beverage, puts smiles on people's faces, and it's just remarkably broad how many people are enjoying cider.
Are there a lot of are there regional variations, and are there fruit variations that make a big difference? With
Absolutely. Not the regional, not so much in New Zealand at this stage, but certainly a hugely broad range of types of cider. I mean, technically our ciders are up there with the best in the world, but we also have a broad range of straight apple and pear style ciders right through to Redwood Speciality and the Old Moot ciders, which are blends of fruit wine and ciders.
Well, how do they stand? I mean, you just hinted at it there, but I mean, do you really stand up against the best of British?
Technically, absolutely. So from a technical perspective, we have world-leading facilities and we have great cider makers, a lot of whom have come out of winemaking backgrounds but are very technically competent. From a flavour and context perspective, very different to a lot of English style ciders. You know, heritage style ciders and perries or pear ciders in the UK are very astringent, highly tannic and made from specific pears and apples for that. Whereas ciders that are predominant in New Zealand and increasingly predominant in Europe and the UK are often made from dessert apples. Doesn't mean we can't have the best quality ingredients, and that's absolutely crucial to good cider. But they are different styles, but we should certainly stand up.
Well, you're about to go offshore into Australia. Have you sussed out the competition? What's it like?
Absolutely, pretty staunch competition in Australia. Both from the fact that the breweries over there are all the major breweries around the world really are getting heavily involved in cider, but as well as that you have a lot of entrants to the category from the winemaking industry in Australia and also those who are just out and out cider makers. And there's an absolute plethora of people springing up, which is fantastic for the category, but it makes for intense competition.
Yeah, okay. Are you going to be the salvation of our apple growers? That's what our apple growers would like to know. They've had a pretty hard time.
They have. I appreciate that. I don't think we could ever claim that we're going to be a silver bullet or a lifesaver for any industry. What I do know is that for us and our growth, it's absolutely crucial that we develop our relationships with our supply partners. Without fruit, we can't make our products. So for us to fulfil our aspirations and have a sustainable business, it's crucial that
What do you see the sort of volume of growth being?
Well, in the last couple of years in New Zealand and Australia, the market and supermarket sales has tracked at roughly 30% growth year on year. I think we'll continue to see that for the next maybe 1 or 2 summers. And at some point that will plateau, but at the moment it's a very steady growth curve on the up, which is great.
Okay. Now, these cider makers that I know are pretty passionate people and they tend to be very wedded to their local product. Is this the case universally, or is it something that you think you can crack and say, well, we think we can actually woo you to this?
Yeah, I think we'll find that people that come into the cider category, whether they're a consumer or involved in production from the cider making side, it does have a distinct romance about it. In the same way that brewers talk about beer and winemakers talk about grape wines, you'll get exactly that passion in cider makers. And I think we're seeing that in our consumers too. Once people come to cider, they're very, very passionate advocates.
Well, before we get to the converts, I mean, I know you have British tourists who come through.
Yes.
So what have they said when they've tried yours compared to their home brews?
Yeah, we've had interesting responses. So if you've got a hardcore Somersetite that comes
that's
through,
what I was thinking of.
They could be looking for a scrumpy that's still got the rat's tail in the bottom of the glass. And in some cases they're disappointed, but then when they try our scrumpy, they appreciate the technical aspects of it and the flavours. So we tend to be able to swing most people around to liking our products.
Now, in terms of the drink itself, is this a potent alcoholic brew?
A broad range. Generally, the answer is no. So the majority of cider on the market sits in that 4 to 5% bracket. So it is a relatively, and I use that word cautiously, but relatively low alcohol refreshing beverage. But there is the full range. So there are some ciders that are up over 8% as well.
Very quickly and finally, do you personally have a favourite?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I'm a passionate cider drinker. Old Moot Fijoran cider is my favourite. but then the Monteith's pear cider sits very close behind
And
it.
how close to that is the rat's tail scrumpy?
We haven't got to the point of being able to generate the rat's tails cleanly, so we enjoy our scrumpy though without the rat's tail.
Justin, thank you very much.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Justin Hall, co-founder of Redwood Cellars. That's all from Sector Report for now. Just remember you can check out our programs anytime online at country99tv.co.nz. Thanks for your company. I'm David Beatson. See you next time.